So now we're going to do the usual, the Ask Me Anything. When usually in chat, you'll put questions. We'll be watching the chat and try and show the answer. On the off chance that we can't answer something here, then maybe we'll figure out how to connect and get you the answer. But usually, for most things, we can answer it. And Tony's on here. I'm on here. We have, I believe, Mateo, PN, Sean, Emma, Bao, Dennis, and possibly Jefferson on. So a lot of sources of information. And I think maybe in the past, Dennis might be the only one that folks haven't seen on an Alliance event, and he's kind of running the Windows side of things. So he'd be able to speak about, or answer about Windows MDM kind of things. But otherwise, I think we've all been on these. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing this slide. And then we could get started. Let me make it so I can see the chat. Okay. And then I don't know if maybe Bao and Emma, if you want to look for questions and kind of read the question off, or Sean.
There was a question earlier about the integration of the web admin pieces and quoting the 18 months. I just want to clarify if I wasn't clear. It's over those 18 months that we'll be moving functionality. It's not, 18 months and then, here it all is all at one time. So it'll be piecemeal, piece at a time over that time period.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the bit about doing the recurring webinars and Foundry content. For anyone on here who hasn't looked at Foundry, this is what Foundry looks like. This is one of the courses. If you go back there, if you've gone there in the past, you'll see that there's already been some cleanup, some removal of topics that, like FileWave Lightning or imaging a Mac through NetBoot, which isn't really done anymore. So that's been trimmed out. And then our next steps are to go through each module and refresh to talk about what can be done in web, what can be done in native, the best way to do it the way the product is today. So you may want to check it out and see what's over here, and you'll see it change over time. And I'm sure we'll send marketing emails out to let folks know when we have significant content added.
There was a question here about making PowerShell scripts a little bit easier to run than they are today. And that's kind of an open issue for us we've been talking about recently. I think Dennis is on and maybe he wants to give a word or two here, but we were talking about moving the FileWave client to a 64-bit client. And it's a perfect opportunity. I'm curious, how many of you out there still have 32-bit Windows clients? Because they still do exist, but mostly in consumer class devices. I'm curious if anybody has actual 32-bit Windows devices out there. Oh, Mike does. All right, so that's a good question. So we're kind of looking at two different things, possibly doing the FileWave client as a 64-bit client, which avoids this wrapper that Josh is talking about here, and possibly also talking about just including this wrapper in the FileWave, when you do a PowerShell script so that it automatically will run it in the right space.
Oh, and I saw a question, Foundry at no cost. Foundry used to have a cost, but we've transitioned to having Foundry have no cost. If you can't log into Foundry today for some reason, just contact customer experience or myself, or you could email that professional.services@filewave.com if you want, because the way it is today, we have to enable a contact to get in, but we're doing some transitions to a new customer relationship system. And the way we're going to set it up, everybody by default will be able to, if you're a contact, you'll be able to get into Foundry without having to ask for it. The only thing paid in Foundry is if you do a FileWave certification, and that might be a good idea, especially after the content is refreshed.
Josh, there was a good question there about looking at some of your, since you have the screen up with your custom fields there, about maybe highlighting a couple of those and what you do with some of those custom field scripts?
Actually, yeah. So this one is one that some version of it will end up in the knowledge base. And it's kind of like the idea that Manu gave about reading a file to, read a custom field to be able to do something. And in this case, I have a file where I put a setting, and that setting will, and you can see here, I'm reading the status of it, putting it into this custom field. And on Windows, you can do the exact same thing. I can get content from the file. And so Mac or Windows, cross-platform, you can read this in. And what this does is, if the file doesn't exist, it puts a setting of new. So I know, okay, this has never been set before, this value on these machines. And if it's new, I want to know that. And then there's an action that's going to happen, and that action will change that field as well. So I have a file set that I will show you, and this may be something that many folks are interested in. So if I go to this file set, the very first thing it does is write to that file. It says, okay, the script called one was the last thing that ran. It does its thing. And then the effect of setting that field will put it in one of two smart groups. And now, why would I want to toggle between smart groups? Well, if you put something in the kiosk, right? And let's say it's a tool that you just want to run over and over. There's always been this longstanding request of, I want to put something in the kiosk and just let the user run it. And then maybe tomorrow they run it again. In an hour, they run it again. And there's not really a mechanism built in to FileWave to do it, just by clicking a box, right? But there might be one day, but there's not today. So what I did was, whenever this runs, when you get set to new, you go into the first smart group automatically. Then when you run the file set from the kiosk, it actually moves you to the other smart group. And so what happens is, you're associated to two copies of the same file set. So in this one, you're associated to file set one, in this one, file set two, but they do the exact same thing. They're kind of a copy of each other, except for setting the value of which one ran. And so for the user, they'll see an install button in the kiosk all the time. But really behind the scenes, it's flip-flopping between groups. And I do that with these two smart groups, and I do that with these two file sets. And the script does all the work of the tool. My tool is going to, for Mac or Windows, elevate somebody to be an administrator for some period of time, let's say 30 minutes or the next time they reboot, and then demote them again, because that's been a request actually 3 times in the past 2 weeks from different people. So where normally professional services charges for custom work, this is something that I felt was more needed across the board. So it's going to just end up in the knowledge base. Might end up part of the Foundry as a class too, to explain how I got to this place to do this. So I hope that made sense. I didn't know if there were any questions about that.
I haven't seen any specific questions about that, but there was a question about the associations to deployments converter tool that we looked at before, as far as the conflict resolution that we did between that it's a direct association or kiosk. That's a little bit of in a prototype, of course, we're looking to kind of create the most complex scenario so that you can see how it would be handled. But in most cases, if you wanted something to be both kiosk and direct associated to devices, you would do 2 deployments for that. So in general, the deployments are going to be, the options for the deployments are going to drive how many deployments you have. But the nice thing about moving the associations to deployments is you're going to have a lot less items to manage. So in a perfect world, if we were doing like a Chrome deployment and we wanted to send that to, all devices in a kiosk manner, we're probably not even going to create a deployment specifically for Chrome. We're just going to add Chrome to a kind of all devices kiosk association that we already have.
if I could, I'll go back to my to the same concept. I realized there was one element I didn't show, that not everybody might be, an expert, I guess, at this, but smart groups. Smart groups can do so much. And this smart group, for instance, is based on an inventory query, right? And of course, when you make a smart group, you get the choice of whether you pick those couple of fields or an inventory query. And an inventory query, you can do complicated things like, I want it to be a Mac or a Windows system, and I want it where the custom field is a value of new or 2. And I want it to, if it's 2, I want it to be in the 1 smart group. This is part of that whole flip-flopping. And I didn't want this applied to all my machines, right? Because when you do something, you really don't want to just start off sending something to all your machines. So I have a custom field called experiment that's just a true false. And if experiment is true, then they're part of this experiment. That's the way that I control, whether it's assigned to everybody. And of course, custom fields could be just assigned to specific devices. So when you go in here, you don't necessarily have to assign to all devices. You can pick devices to assign them to. Because again, this custom field, if you've coded it badly, could do some damage. So you're always going to want to test. Some other, fields that I use, I believe that these are in the knowledge base. They just read in the settings from FileWave client. So if I want to confirm that something really has a booster set, I could easily report on that. BitLocker key is interesting. We show FileVault keys in product, but you might want BitLocker keys if you don't have somewhere that you're escrowing them that or if you're not really managing BitLocker, but you want to be able to collect the keys in case somebody turned on BitLocker. This is a very simple thing to get a key to a custom field. There is also, there may be like a log file you want to monitor. For instance, my Elevate permissions. So right now what it does is it just reads that log. Here's Windows, here's Mac OS, and it will just output it. You could also use things like tail on the Mac to just take the last couple of lines, because if it's a giant log, you really don't want to fill a custom field with a giant log of information, because when you add that field to your admin, that's going to cause some slowness if you have a lot of clients and very large entries. So I try my best for any log that could be large to only show a little bit of it. This one I think Bao gave to me, but this was like an example of, software updates spits out some updates and you do a little processing, you end up with a number, So pretty much Mac or Windows, anything you could think of, and you can see here's the Windows equivalent, you can report on through custom fields. So if you don't use custom fields today, you should definitely think about if there's something you can't get from FileWave. You could talk to professional services or somebody like Manu, a partner of ours that could likely help you get the thing you want. So any other questions come in that I could show an answer to? Or
there have been a few requests to go over Teamviewer setup and license distribution and everything.
Oh, okay. I could do that. That would take a couple of minutes, but that is doable. So the first thing is, I'm going to point you at the knowledge base, right? Because there are a few platforms. I'm going to maybe talk specifically about Mac and Windows just to keep it easy. I mean, iOS similarly would have, well, iOS is a little different, but let's just talk about Mac and Windows for the moment. Because I'm thinking, especially on the Mac, that might be where people struggle with the profiles. So this current version of this article was actually from Sean. So what it is this TCC profile and an installer. And in our case, we're using Teamviewer host, which can receive a connection, but can't like go out and remote control someone else's machine. So if you're like a FileWave admin who's controlling people's machines, you want the full version of Teamviewer on your machine so you can control others. But your endpoints, you may want Teamviewer hosts so they can just be controlled by others. So what I would do is, and maybe I will grab this and just kind of set it up to walk you through. Right, so I grab this, and then I will move my windows around on my other screen. And I'm just unzipping the 2 zip files so that I can bring them in, right? And so if I go to file sets, and I'm doing this in the native admin, I know, but I was here anyway, so. Okay, so that's gonna take it just a moment to upload. But then when it's done, it will have a profile and a host install. And one really neat thing that I'm gonna show you is, so, you know, there's the issue of how do I make sure the profile is on the Mac first? And Sean actually accounted for that. If you look at the scripts, you'll see that there's a requirement script. So for anyone who doesn't know, a requirement script allows you to say, well, this should not install. In fact, it doesn't even download unless the requirements is passed. So in this case, you can see that it's looking to see if a profile is installed. And this profile is this profile. So if you were to assign this to, let's say, a smart group of your Macs, what you would see on the devices is, and actually I could do this. So I will go and I'll assign them to my lab machine. So Teamviewer host install. I'm just going to assign it to one machine because I don't want to do things to my whole lab. But once that's assigned, then when I go to my client, you're going to see they're associated. And I don't know, I guess I'll wake up that Mac, but depending on how quickly this plays out, I'll tell you that you will see that the host install will say that it didn't pass the verification script, but that's normal. It'll say that until this profile is installed. And, you know, on, for instance, Big Sur in Monterey, that's handled by MDM. So we, you know, kind of throw it over the wall and okay, that happened pretty quick. So requirements not met. So that's not a problem. This hasn't failed. It's that it's waiting for this profile to install. Once it's installed, the requirements will pass and then it will turn right around and install it. And you will have accomplished setting 2 of the 3 things that Teamviewer says that it needs, because screen recording can't be set through a profile. So that would be the only thing that Teamviewer, you know, would possibly complain about, but we are limited by the requirements that Apple makes around what you can set. Okay. Now for Windows, if I again go here.
Josh, question on that requirement script. Do we have that published in the knowledge base about how you can use a requirement script to look for a particular profile? That'd be a really good one to add if you don't.
The text of it is mentioned in here, so if somebody was to search, they might hit upon this article and see it, but there's not, I don't know that there's an article that, you know, takes this example and makes it just a specific example, but I could do that.
No, there isn't. It's on my to-do list.
Ah, good. So Sean will perhaps do that. So
that was Sean Holden, everybody. He has promised to do that by. You promised to do that, Sean?
Yeah, Thursday, November the.
Just don't say which Thursday.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
But yeah, the so for anyone who doesn't know, Sean's spent his time in support here at FileWave, and he's moving over to professional services. We're training the person that will be taking the support cases in Europe, or I should say Sean is, and Rudy and others are training the person that will. And so as we get more and more of Sean's time, it means the knowledge base and Foundry will benefit from Sean's knowledge, because he really is good at tinkering with things and documenting them. So on the Windows side, similarly, there are some things that we do. And actually on the Mac side too with Teamviewer. Teamviewer host, if you install it, you'll notice that it wants to pop up a little wizard at the end of the install. We suppress that. And in the knowledge base article, it says how we did that. Same thing on the Windows side. We suppress it, with this. And I actually don't really have to download this and do it, because there's nothing, well, maybe I'll download it just to show, but it's easier than on the Mac side, I'd say, because we don't have to deal with TCC profiles. And if I go,
hey Josh, it might be good too to just show that
the switches
script in the like that requirement script in that web editor, right? That does the better color coding and such.
Yes, I could do that. Yeah, I'll do that right after I show. So this one, if you look at the Teamviewer host scripts, you'll see that, it's just really running the setup exe. But if I do properties, you can see it runs with a silent switch, and it uses this options file. This option file is put there. It's a content of the file set. So if you were to double click on the Windows one, you can see, what all is in here, right? And so if we were to look at the options file, you'll see that it's just a series of registry keys. Teamviewer documented a way to kind of export settings. And so you could take this and you could tweak it too. We just want to give everybody like a starting point that makes it easy. And then to Tony's point, if I go in the FileWave admin and I go to payloads and I go to my Elevate permissions for Mac, and then I go to scripts, you can see that here's my script, and I want to edit it, and you can see how much better editing in here with the colorization is. It's much easier to make edits. At least it's much easier to make edits and not mess up, because you can see all the colorization. Like if you miss a quote, then you would see that this whole line would be green, perhaps, if I missed the end quote. So this editor is quite a bit nicer. And so you really can do these things in the web admin. So I could have had either starting point at this point, but I would say it'd be a good practice for folks to come into the web admin and see what can be done. For the moment, the concept of deployments being separate from associations is a challenge, but that's where the tool that Tony spoke about would come in handy, where you could flip associations over to deployments and then move forward with doing deployments for everything, if that's what you wanted. And if somebody accidentally made another association, you could easily migrate it over right after. Be no harm. It's not like you'd have to redo your work.
And I think next time we'll probably do some content in the next Alliance event on kind of a deployment strategy, because that before you even start doing them, you want to have an idea of what you're looking to accomplish. It's kind of like cleaning out your garage. We're going to take everything out, but then we're going to reorganize and put these tools here or there. That's the same thing that when we look to start cleaning up associations, we'll probably want to do that. But the first thing you have to decide is, how do I want to deploy? Am I deploying an application to multiple groups, or do I want to think of it more as the destination instead, that I want to deploy to, say, the entire EU division, or do I want to deploy to the States, and then I have some things that are kiosk and some things that are not, etc. So we need to think about that before you kind of start. So I think next time maybe we'll cover that a bit.
Yeah, and actually I should carry this Teamviewer thing a little bit further. So once you got Teamviewer on a device, what dictates whether you can right-click on the device and say to remote control it or not? It's the same permissions as the Observe client. So there's two things. So there's on FileWave.com, when you go to do a custom PKG or a custom MSI, right, there is a setting about remote control being enabled and remote control prompting. So these same permissions are used both for Observe and Teamviewer. So however you've decided to do Observe, Teamviewer would work as well. And if you needed to change these settings, you could, for instance, push out a thing called a superpref. And if you look in the knowledge base, you'll see that's just a way to overwrite client settings, you know, and change it. You could, and I want to point out actually a bug that, you know, before it bites somebody, because we already addressed it. So when you right click, you'll see that I only have remote prompt. I don't have unattended. But if I show the original and you right click, you can see I can do unattended. And we already know about this and it's already been addressed. It just snuck through in the latest release. So if you're wondering, if you're looking at a device and wondering, why can't I do an unattended? Think about if you're looking at a clone of a device. In the next update, that should be addressed. It's just kind of a minor thing, but you know, I could see how it would confuse somebody. Also, to do Teamviewer, to see this at all as well, you can see it here, and you can definitely do remote control here. So if I go here, let's see, you can see that I could do remote session against those devices. In fact, in the web, it does not have that issue with the clones. You can pick a clone here and pick to do a remote session. It was just a native admin bug. As well, you need the right to use Teamviewer, or I should say the license to use Teamviewer. And for anyone who hasn't seen it, because I've spoken with a few people recently who just didn't know where to turn it on. So in Manage Administrators, you come to the Teamviewer tab, and you'll see that in my case, these were from my testing, you know, that I had these users. And a couple of things about these. So when I add somebody and I put in, you know, Jay Smith, this has to match who they log in as. So if you, for instance, set up single sign-on to log in from Azure or Google or Okta, then your username might be like, you know, josh.levitsky@filewave.com. You know, that might be mine if I set that up. So you're going to want to, you know, see what your login is, because, you know, when you set up SSO, you don't have the user over here. You have the group for that SSO. However, licensing for Teamviewer is per person. And this highlights an example of what you should not do, because the Teamviewer licenses are assigned to a person, not to a generic account. And the problem that you'll have is, although you might technically be able to make a user called, you know, sysadmin or assign it to FWAdmin, we have controls in place so that you can't remote control from multiple locations with the same username. So that's in place, not because we want to make things harder for you. It's because of the licensing with Teamviewer, that it really is a per person thing. So we had to put controls in place to enforce that. And this interface should get better over time. For instance, I could add a user called Bob, and maybe I'll do that because I have 5 licenses, so I won't really mess myself up. Yeah, sure, I want to assign it. Oh, I can't because I'm pointed at a test server. So ignore that. So I didn't mess myself up. So my service pointed at a test environment, and so ignore that. But if you made a user with a capital B for Bob, it is case sensitive, these usernames, and that would be sort of a problem. So be very sure about the user you create. You can only change them after 6 months has passed. That's why this date is here. That too is from licensing requirements with Teamviewer, with our contract with them. If something happens though, and you did put in a user that doesn't exist, reach out to support, because you know, we're going to figure that out with you, because these controls are all in place to control licensing agreements. They're not in place to make your life harder. So definitely reach out to support if you created a user who doesn't really exist, or accidentally created FWAdmin as a user, and then you realize that you probably shouldn't have, and you want to set up a different user. But once I have the rights, then I could remote control a machine, once I've done all these things that I showed. This will also make it to Foundry. This is part of content that we don't have in Foundry because this is so new, and it will be in Foundry as part of the classes. Any other questions come up? Oh, I did see a license question as I'm skimming through, but the licenses included, there's a couple of licenses included. It's based on kind of customer size, what ends up being, because we do pay for the Teamviewer licenses. So like imagine if we just built it all and it was all just our cost, you know, we could be more flexible, but we actually pay Teamviewer for them. So you'll have one or two, you know, possibly there could be different numbers, right? If you're a person with 200,000 licenses, then, you know, it may be a different number. You'll see it, so it's not a mystery to anybody. When you go to Manage Administrators, you're going to see on the Teamviewer tab how many licenses you have in your instance. If this says 0 for some reason, then that's probably an error, and you should reach out to us and let us know. But otherwise, yeah.
Sorry, Josh. There are some customers that do have 0, and it's 100% intentional. If you've got a license which limits your, so if you click on the server drop down.
Oh, yes, the privacy thing.
You can't do it with that window open, but yeah, if you click on the server drop down and an activation code, okay.
And then bring this over.
So some customers have got to allow a collection of personal data set to no. It's hard fixed on at the license end. If you have a license of that nature, that impacts Teamviewer as well. So you will have 0 showing. Okay, so that would be intentional.
That is a good catch. That is the one exception where that would be the case. Now, if you did that, you probably did it on purpose because you don't want personal data collection. But if that was set to no, and for instance, you were a school in the US and you can't think of a reason why you would have done it, you know, reach out to us because maybe it's set wrong in the license. I mean, either way, if it's set to no and you're trying to use Teamviewer, then speak with us and we can chat through like what the impact would be if Teamviewer was to be able to be activated.
Additionally, if you were to look at the client monitoring preferences, if anyone's wondering, how do you set the idea of prompt user or not prompt user or what have you?
Oh, yeah.
So
let
the
me.
client monitor you've got there.
Yeah, but
Is it offsite?
I have to. No. It's here. I just have to steal its IP address.
Yeah.
Actually, I can do it the easy way. I think I have it in here as. No, that's not right.
There it is. Oh.
Yeah, but I don't think that actually matches my VM. Oh, it does. Oh, right, because I was setting up a test. And then I monitor, and then paste. And then let's see if it will connect to my VM. Otherwise, I could do it on my Mac. Yeah, I'll do it on my Mac. One sec. I think that's the IP, unless it changed. It is 143. Well, there we go. There's always a reason. In this case, it was a typo. There we go. So you were going to have me bring up preferences, right?
Yeah.
Here's where I have to see. I set this to a random thing. So imagine that you come here to preferences and you set it. That I just hadn't prepared to go there, so I didn't.
Sorry.
No. I had built the client for that Mac the other day, and I just put a random thing in, thinking I wasn't going to use Observe Client, and I wasn't going to do. Yeah, I probably should have thought about that for this, but yes, you could set it here too if you wanted to tweak somebody.
Your script should be successful by now, right?
Which one?
The requirement script for the profile.
That's a lot of pressure to make him go back and look at that now to make sure it worked.
It is, and not only is it installed successfully, I do see the icon on it. So let's just take this demo, even make it more risky. Let's show the original so that I can do it. And actually, no, let's use the web admin, because I should use the web admin too. We're actually going to test if I actually have Teamviewer installed on my Mac, because that's where you would run into problems. I do have Teamviewer, it looks like. And that should. No, I did not. Well, that's where unplanned demos are sometimes problematic, but let's make sure I actually have. Oh, okay. So when I show the status, you can see I have Teamviewer host installed. So the problem I ran into is I was testing Teamviewer host where I could be controlled, but Teamviewer host does not permit me to control somebody. So I'd have to turn around and put the full Teamviewer on here, which I could actually do. That would only take a second.
Are you trying to control the same machine, or are you using to control?
No, it's a MacBook sitting off to the side, but I have Teamviewer host on my admin machine because I was playing with Teamviewer host. Someone might do that also if they didn't realize that they needed the full Teamviewer to be on their machine. Exit Teamviewer, quit.
And this is where I'll put on my teacher hat and say, this is why you always try to work in VMs when you're testing stuff so that you never impact your production machine with it.
That is true. So if I go here and I go here, so this is sort of a good lesson, right? So for the Mac, the reason that we give the full install, but we say host is recommended, is because you as a FileWave admin actually need to have the full Teamviewer to control anything. So you'll see, once I run that install, continue. And if I had a lot of admins, I might make this into a file set so that my admin machines would get the full Teamviewer, and not have to run it on a one-off. Okay, so then if I launch Teamviewer, okay, so then let's go back and do our example of controlling somebody. So I have this machine, and we're going to say don't prompt user because that permission was set. Let's see, I'm going to say it should allow to open Teamviewer, and I can see that machine. So this is now on the other machine. It does ask me about using the microphone, and the only preference, so I'm not sure why in my demo I don't see the other windows, but it's funny because, so I think I just have a sort of a glitch on that machine.
No, that's the screen recording. So because we can't pre-approve screen recording, You
Oh,
can
right,
get
I have to
you
do
can
that.
get to the device for certain elements. So I mean, things that we can allow are things like full disk access and that kind of stuff. So you've got the basics of connection, but because Apple stop us from doing screen recording, that's the only thing you'll see until that's approved.
Yeah, I forgot that as I was doing this, and that was the thing that I mentioned earlier, that the TCC profile took care of 2 of the 3 things that you need, but we're limited a little bit by Apple requirements. And so, in fact, now you can see everything. And so when I connected to this machine, the only requirement was making sure that screen recording was working. But otherwise, I could see the title bar there. I'd have to just tell the user. And Teamviewer complains to you. It'll say it here if you do check system access. So what it would be is these 2 would be green, so you won't have to talk a user through those. But this one, you would have to do that, and then they'd end up on the security and privacy, and they'd have to check this. But we just took that, in an unplanned demo from not being on that machine to installed, and me as an admin having the full Teamviewer on my machine and remote controlling it from the web admin.
And I just wanted to add, while we can't enable screen recording through a profile, you can allow standard users to have access to enable it. So if the person you're logging into is a standard user, you can set that up so they can approve it versus having to have administrator rights.
That's a good point. I don't know if our Teamviewer article currently has that explained, but we could take a look at the wording again and just be sure. So, and obviously on the Windows side, I would have just been able to connect to my Windows machine. Yeah, I saw John point out in the chat that the privacy settings with the Observe client is the same issue. No, and the privacy setting allow screen recording is a one and done, Bobby. So, and I would also say that back like when I was a customer and I had an Apple person, it's super important to tell your Apple rep if something is an issue. Now, they may not make any change, but if they hear from 50 schools that there needs to be a managed way to enable screen recording, then you guys know from opening support cases with Apple that there's like whenever you open a ticket, you say the number of devices impacted, right? And that adds up, and the more devices impacted by something, Apple makes it a priority. And so when I was, a customer of Apple's more directly, I used to, make connections at other companies and see if people that were peers of mine had similar challenges. And then we would all open up tickets and add up the total number of devices we had. We'd, and that would help. And so if you don't speak to your Apple rep, you probably should, make sure to let them know, because, a lot of them do care. And if you work with, like, I know some of the professional services people there care a lot. And so if you're ever working with them, maybe pass the message through them too. So anything else? I know we're coming up. We have about 4 minutes. So if I missed anything critical.
I think the questions well is drying up a little bit.
That's okay. At least we got to show off Teamviewer setup, at least for Mac and Windows. If I went to set up iOS, it would be similar, stumbling through a little bit. Although actually, this dialog is that file set that I was talking about, the flip-flop file set that makes somebody an admin for a period of time. So that will make it to the knowledge base.
John, when you have a device that's reporting location, there'll be an additional location tab in the device's detail view in the web admin. So when you click on an individual device in the web admin, it opens up a kind of a detail view that's similar to client info, but actually better. It has more detail in there, more information. There'll be an additional tab if you've got a device that's reporting location. I don't know if you have an example, Josh.
I think I do, but I didn't prepare for it, so if I don't. There it is. And I could open this in Google Maps. Oh, Kansas. This is that famous like address that everything shows up as when the location's not known. You know, the police have visited them a lot for stolen things and it's not actually stolen.
Yeah,
so
well,
that one's a bad example.
But I'm guessing in this case, you just didn't want to be swatted or anything. So you
Yeah.
have to show somebody else.
Yeah. So that spot in Kansas, if you ever see that, is a kind of a known address for all, like for cell phone geolocation and stuff. I don't have one that's doing location right now.
Well,
But
I'm looking forward to that kiosk flipper thing getting posted in the knowledge base, because I think that's really super useful.
yeah. Definitely if you need to run something once, or not once, but repeatedly for an end user, so they don't have to keep opening up a ticket. You don't have to keep picking to resend a package. You could definitely use this idea, and it would use potentially 2 smart groups to operate, to flip, and then 2 file sets for, you know, because you have to flip-flop, and then 1 custom field to track the status of the flipping. But you could repeat this for other tools. I'm going to show this tool specifically, but I'm also going to explain in the article how you could use this process for anything. Kind of separate the flipping process from the making them an admin process. And I have it working pretty well on the Mac. I'm trying to do it on Windows too. I'm just deciding how I'm going to schedule tasks, whether I use just Task Scheduler or whatever on Windows 10 and 11.
Josh, there are 2 final questions here. The question on Teamviewer for iOS, yeah, if you look in the knowledge base, and in fact, Josh, if you want to show from the web admin that integrated help, when you're in, say, the devices view, if you go to the help icon there, you're going to see that has a link about Teamviewer. And on that landing page, go ahead and go to that. And on that landing page, you'll see that there's a breakout of all the different things for all the different platforms, all the articles. So yeah, there's all the instructions there for each platform. And then, Josh, if you want to hop back in the web admin for a moment, John was asking about how do you set device to missing mode?
That was set tracking state, right?
Yep.
And that's that same thing that you see like in the native, where you right click, whoops, cancel, where you right click and you go here. Like this same dialog is here. And you can see it's, you know, it meets the same function, and I think it's a little nicer. So actions for devices are here. When you have multiple devices selected, a lot of times commands might appear up here that you might do across. So like I could tell both of these to do a verify. So, you know, you might see different things here to do to many devices than what you see on kind of the one-off.
And what's cool about this integration in the web is that you can then use the API to do that. So if you wanted to do something really nifty, like have a smart group for devices in a certain state that you automatically put it in missing mode, you can do that with those API calls programmatically. And
I actually do, well, I do single app mode, right? So think about like if you like to put a device in a single app mode and show an app that says like return my device, as an example, because I had a customer that wanted to do that. I set a custom field through the API that put them in a smart group and then assign the profile with the single app mode. But you can also, pretty much anything that you can do in the web admin, like setting that missing mode, you can do through APIs. There is one difference that Sean and I, when we were talking about it, he pointed out, not every API is fully documented. So if we go, and I know we're a couple minutes over, so we'll just do this and wrap up. But if I go to my server /API/doc, you get to all the documented APIs, right? And, you know, for particular APIs, you know, it may explain what parameters are used for it so that you know, what it would do. A lot of times from the name, you can tell, you know, what the thing does. You know, there might be a description here about what it does. There might be a try it out, which depending on the thing, you might not work the best to try it out in this interface. You may want to make just a simple script that does it. And again, professional services or one of our partners can help you with that. We do plan to, in Foundry, make an API course. We already will do API consulting through professional services directly. But from this page, the reason that I could try it out is because I was authenticated already to the web admin. So I was logged in as FW admin. Somebody, you know, if you go to this page, you can't do anything on it unless you're authenticated. There's another way to authenticate. I don't want to go too far down the API rabbit hole, but there are private APIs. And if you see private in the API, it's not documented. It is subject to change from version to version, you know, and so you might just want to be cautious. You know, it may accomplish the thing you want, but you just want to be cautious knowing that it's not a documented API. I know I've showed this before, but I'll just show it quickly as my kind of my last thing.
And I would mention, if you run across one that's private that you think should be public, they're not private all necessarily for a reason other than to make sure that we're fully committed to them. So you can request those. So if you, when you talk to the service desk folks, etc., if you say, hey, I think this thing should really be public, we can prioritize getting that done too.
Yeah, there's and so the way that you would learn about what it is, you know, let's say I want to see, I click on this device and you can see some things happen, right? And let's just drag this off to the side for the second, and let's go to custom fields. What did I want to do? I want to do something that makes a change. So maybe I'll edit a device field. And I think I did this in an example, another example, but Bob had a baby, it's a boy. And if you're like 40 years old, you remember what that is, or older. So, okay, so then I set that. And so what you're gonna do is you're gonna, you know, look through this. These are the things that happen. You can see it's a short list. You can also clear the list at any time. But you can see like, okay, here's this one that was like an edit. And what was in the payload? Well, okay, this one isn't it. So let's say I was super confused and I didn't know what it was because I let too much stuff go in here, because that's gonna get you frustrated. So what you do is you hit clear and you edit device fields and you say, I'll just add something to it. And then I could stop recording because I don't want anything else to go in there. And then I can see, okay, so this had something, right? So if I view the source, that was to edit. If I view source, oh, look, here's Bob had a baby, it's a boy with a Z on it, which is what I just did. So I can look at this and know that it was this URL, and I could figure out that this is probably the device ID. I look for that number. You can see up here, that same number. You can see this was done through a patch. So there's gets, there's patches. And if I look at the payload, well, all it was that we sent comment, Bob had a baby, it's a boy. If I view source, this is the exact thing. So I could copy and paste this into my script, and then I could be able to manipulate comments. And in PS, Bao in my group has been spending time to make kind of modular API scripts. So like if you wanted to put a device in a group through APIs, you'd have to be able to look up the device's ID. You'd have to be able to look up the group ID. And, you know, because you want to do it by like group name and device name potentially, or device serial number. And so he's been putting together kind of things to make that super easy, like puzzle pieces to build APIs. And we definitely will do that through our consulting. Some or all of it may make it into Foundry, into the API course that we want to put up. Okay.
Well, we've run over a little bit here, but we, as always, we really enjoy doing these, and we really thank you all for joining us. These make, I think, good sessions and also give us great ideas for things to add to the knowledge base, feature set, changes as well. So we really appreciate everybody's, open and honest feedback. And thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks everybody. And these are some of that information that we shared. And please reach out to us if you need anything.
Thanks so much, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you all. See you guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Keep